Well, with seemingly endless options in the budget air cooler space, today we're going to take a look at the Cool Gammaxx GTE V2. And this cooler's actually been out for a while. It's nothing new to the market, but since it's dropped into that $30 budget range, I thought we'd give it a look. So today we'll do a quick unboxing, installation, and we'll do a little bit of performance testing, let you know what I think about the cooler. Alright, so for the unboxing, pretty standard. You get a box, haha. From there, you've got two compartments within the box. The first compartment actually has the mounting hardware, so it has the screws, back plate, thermal paste, etc. It also contains a manual in which will tell you how to install the cooler. And in the second compartment, you've got the fan and the heatsink itself. The fan has two cables on it. One of them is for the RGB, and the other is a 4-pin PWM connector for the fan. And the heatsink itself is pretty standard fin density, as well as having 4 copper heat pipes on it. For installation, all you're going to do is take the back plate and find the screw holes that correspond to your socket type, put the screws in through that hole, and then mount that to your motherboard. From there, you're going to want to take the plastic washers, drop one on each screw, and then attach the standoffs on top of the washers. Once you have that in place, you want to take the heatsink and attach the brackets in the orientation that suits your socket type. And you will have to deal with 2 of the tiniest screws I've ever had to deal with outside of M.2 screws. Once the brackets are connected to the heatsink, what you'll want to do is peel the label off of the bottom of the heatsink, otherwise your thermals are really going to suck. Apply a small amount of thermal paste to your CPU, or a large amount if you're into that sort of thing. Set the heatsink on top of the standoffs and screw down with the spring-loaded screws that are included in the package. From there, all you need to do is take the 4-pin PWM connector to make the fan go whirly, 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 and then connect the RGB cable to the RGB extension cable to make the cooler go, Alright, so for testing, I wanted to pair this budget cooler with a budget system, so we're going to use the Intel 10105F on a B560M motherboard. On that motherboard, we'll have 16 gigs of RAM, and we will set XMP profile, but other than that, we're going to leave the stock settings, and we're using Windows 10 completely up to date. In addition, we are using open air, that way we don't have to worry about any kind of case restricting airflow to the cooler itself. And I don't know how Gamers Nexus explains that every single time. So for stress testing, we're using IDA64 Extreme. We did a 30-minute run. The room itself was about 70 degrees in freedom units and 21 degrees Celsius for the rest of you guys. And we ran that run 30 minutes and we got 57 degrees as the average temperature on there. Now 57 degrees is pretty lackluster. Even on a budget system and a budget cooler, I would expect those temperatures to be higher during a stress test. So I thought, how could we actually make this a little bit worse for it? And I decided we'll go ahead and run Prime 95 on the system, because Prime 95 is not really a real world scenario as far as putting stress on there, but it does heat up a processor. So we ran Prime 95, same conditions, 30 minutes, and we got up to 62 degrees. Yeah, that's still pretty lackluster. So what can we do next? If only there were a higher TDP chip that we could use. Got it. So we're going to strap this to my 10850K, which is a 125 watt TDP chip, versus the 10105F, which is a 65 watt TDP chip. And let's see if we can get that boy to heat up. So under the same conditions, the same 70 degrees freedom and 21 degrees Celsius, actually different chip, different motherboard, because it was on a Z490 motherboard, but no overclocking, so all stock settings, 16 gigs of RAM, and we ran that same IDA64 Extreme stress test, and we got it to heat up a little bit. So on the 10850K, we were able to actually push it with this cooler to 85.5 degrees, which is actually pretty warm, but not bad for a 10850K. In addition to us hitting the 85.5 degrees Celsius, we did actually manage to maintain 4.8 gigahertz for most of the stress test. There was some bouncing between right at 4.9 and down a little bit to 4.78, somewhere in there. So right around 4.8 gigahertz, and that's typically where my 10850K runs, even with my 360 millimeter AIO attached to it. So yeah, I would say cooling performance on this cooler is actually really good. Turning our attention now to sound, I can tell you while it was on the open air bench on the 10105F, the system was barely audible. I mean, it was only 57 degrees, so the fans didn't have to spin hard to keep it cool. However, you really couldn't hear it. Now on the 10850K, that's a different story, as we were approaching 90 degrees temperature, 85.5 degrees, whatever. So it was audible, but it wasn't obnoxious, and I'll let you take a listen to that here. And yeah, so I don't have anything to really test noise inside the room yet, but maybe we get enough people to subscribe, we can change that. Now, performance and everything on this cooler is actually good, but there were a couple things I didn't like. So particularly aesthetically with this particular version of the cooler, I didn't like it because it's not painted. However, I will say that there is a black version of the same cooler and it runs for the same price, so I would probably go for that one. Or if you have a white build, there is a white version of this cooler, but it is a couple dollars more, but that should take care of aesthetics. Though if you do have a micro ATX case, I can tell you that the way it gets mounted in the case, you really can't actually see the heat stack itself because it does have a cover at the top and of course the RGB fan in the front. So it's not horrible, but I know it's there and it bothers me. In addition to the aesthetics, I also don't like the RGB cable. Now the RGB cable that is connected to the fan is a weird connector. It's basically plugs in as an extension, and then that has the 4-pin RGB connector which you can plug in. So if you're not giving me a hub and I have to plug it into my board, don't give me an extra cable. Just make it a 4-pin. Let me deal with it. Or if it's proprietary, then make sure I can connect your hub, or at least tell me there's a hub or something like that. But just don't do the stupid cable that's on there. It just comes off as being, you know, very poorly executed RGB cable. Other than that, I think the cooler actually performs very well, so I'll leave Amazon links to all the different versions of this cooler down in the description below, where you can also find the link to the Pinkytech Discord server if you're so interested in that. And if you don't like this particular cooler, how it looks, how it performs, etc., you can check out this playlist over here or somewhere on the screen, and you can see the other coolers that I've done a review on. And as always, guys, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Maybe over here.